Thank you everyone for joining our 2023 Whole Kids Foundation Garden Grant Info webinar. This webinar will be most specifically to school applications. Those of you who are working with gardens that are located at a school, this will be the webinar for you. A lot of the content's going to be the same. So if you feel like you might be on the wrong webinar, if perhaps you're with a nonprofit or trying to apply for a garden that's on the grounds of a nonprofit, we are holding a second webinar tomorrow. But fear not, the recordings will be available and a lot of it will be applicable. So to introduce myself, my name is Stephanie Porto. I'm a program manager for Whole Kids Foundation, and I am joined by my teammate, Vanessa Cruz, who will also be supporting with the content and at the end, helping to field questions so that we can get some of your guys' questions answered. So first and foremost, you can, at any point after the webinar, find information about the Garden Grant or about Whole Kids Foundation at www.wholekidsfoundation.org. You can also email us at grants@wholekidsfoundation.org with any questions you might have. I'm realizing I need to, if you guys would give me just 1 second, I need to pull up a second format of the webinar here so that I know when to pass it off to Vanessa. I can't see that with my screen share, so give me just 1 second. That way you guys get the most organized info. We're not talking over each other, so thank you for bearing with me. All right, so back to it. A few housekeeping items. So again, this is the webinar that we're giving specific to those of you who are working with schools and schools that are going to have gardens on their grounds. We are going to hold a webinar for nonprofit applications tomorrow at the same time, 2 p.m. Central. And again, a lot of the information is going to be the same. So don't worry if you feel like you might be on the wrong one, or maybe this time just worked better for you. You can always check out one or the other or reach out to us with questions. So during the webinar, go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A function of Zoom. If you could avoid using the chat for your questions, we're going to be fielding questions from the Q&A function. So you're more likely to get your answers if you submit questions that way. We'll leave time at the end of the webinar for that. And then if you have to leave us early, or if you feel like maybe you're on the wrong webinar, or you know somebody who wanted to join but couldn't, the recording will be available. We'll send it out on a follow-up email and it will be on our website. And then additionally, we are going to hold a Q&A webinar that will be mostly time, right? Just for live Q&A. We'll spend the majority of the time utilizing the QA function to answer your questions live. And we have a typo here. The webinar will be on February 15th, not March 15th. So the grant window is only open from February 1 to March 1. So keep that in mind. The Q&A webinar will be in 2 weeks on February 15th. So today we are going to cover our agenda. We'll go over a little bit about Whole Kids Foundation for those of you who may not be familiar, really basic info about our mission and what we do. We'll discuss the eligibility and requirements of our garden grant in particular. We'll talk about the grant timeline, some resources that might be beneficial for you to check out. We'll take a look at the online application system, and then we'll leave time for questions. So I'm going to pass it off to Vanessa to share a little bit about Whole Kids Foundation with you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa, like Stephanie said, and I want to share a little bit about our mission. So our mission here at Whole Kids Foundation is to work to improve children's nutrition by supporting schools and organization and inspiring families. And the way we accomplish this goal or work towards it is through our various grant programs. So our grant programs, I'm sure you've heard of the Garden Grant, that's why you're here today. Our Bee Grant is another very popular one, but we also have grants that specifically support school food, like our salad bars or Get Schools Cooking Grant. And we also have a Healthy Teachers program that we've converted to an online course hosted by the Institute of Child Nutrition. And you can find all of this information online. If you complete the Healthy Teachers program and you're a teacher, you can receive up to 2 hours in continuing education. And then I want to talk a little bit more about our B grant. If we can go to the next slide. So our B grant goes hand in hand with our garden grant. A lot of people who apply for the garden grant also apply for the B grant. And our B grant is valued at $2,000. And we partner with the BCause Project, who provide consultation services. And you can also receive either an equipment grant in the form of the observation hive or the Langstroth hive, or a monetary grant to support your bee pollinators.
Thank you, Vanessa. So let's dive into our garden grant. Since 2012, through our garden grant program, Whole Kids Foundation has invested over $17 million in over 7,500 schools and organizations that have edible educational garden spaces, supporting 4.7 million children via this program. Why do we have a garden grant? So we know that gardens work. When kids grow the food, they're more likely to eat the food. So in that way, can it help them to learn where their food comes from, spark their curiosity? And we know also that the benefit of these garden spaces extends well beyond consumption. So in order to connect kids to their food and empower them in increasing their consumption of fruits and vegetables, we support schools and organizations with our garden grant. So who do we support with our garden grant program? We offer this garden grant to applicants across the US and in all of Canada. We provide grant support to applicants in all areas of the United States and Canada with our garden grant. So not just schools or organizations, say in big cities or in communities where a Whole Foods market might be. We look to support gardens in cities all across, in all types of areas, rural, urban, suburban, you name it. Each year, we usually receive over 1,000 applications, and we fund between 500 and 600 garden grants each year. Every year, we just receive many more applications than we're able to fund, but we love seeing the enthusiasm and these high numbers of applications. We do accept garden grant applications from both schools and nonprofit organizations, specifically 501c3s, and both first-time applicants to the Whole Kids Foundation Garden Grant, as well as returning applicants. You have the ability to get this grant more than once, so we do limit it. Vanessa will share about that. And we do give priority to first-time applicants to the Whole Kids Foundation Garden Grant, and we do award more school applicants than we do nonprofit. So what's included in the garden grant? It is a $3,000 monetary grant. We send the check to you all with inside a larger grant box that has some other items to support your garden, but the primary function of the grant is this $3,000 to support your garden, your new or existing garden, and we really look for you to tell us the plan of your garden. We get applications from gardens of all shapes and sizes, so we're really looking for what your plans are. You share that with us, and there's no one right shape or size for your garden. So when we review the application, some of the things we look for are youth involvement in the garden. So we want to see that the students or the kids that you served are engaged in the work of the garden from the very beginning through all phases and components. That's everything from building or designing the garden to, I'm seeing here you guys lost the PowerPoint, so I'm going to bring that back up. Vanessa, can you see the PowerPoint?
I can still see it.
You can see the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry about that, you guys. Youth involvement in the garden. So like I said, all phases, everything from designing to building to maintenance to harvesting. That could be weeding, that could be beautification projects in and around the garden, you name it. We also look for garden plans, garden programs that make the connection between healthy eating. As Vanessa shared, the mission of Whole Kids really is to improve children's nutrition. And we do that by way of our program. So really looking for these gardens that make the connection, maybe have a nutrition education component, but really showing kids where fresh fruits and vegetables come from and getting them excited about it. We look for strong integration into the academic curricular and into the school or overall community. So really looking for that feeling that the garden and the garden program is part of the school or organization culture. We look for evidence of strong administrative buy-in. So do you have support from your leadership within your school, your principal or your superintendent or what have you? We know that that lends to the sustainability of a garden program over time. So we definitely look for that. And then sustainability otherwise. So is your garden program and your plan viable over time? Do you have other sources of incoming revenue? Do you have relationships in the community that can help support your garden? Do you have a diverse community of stakeholders that support your garden within your school? Maybe not just one teacher or one parent that may, leave the school and eventually the garden, if they were their major advocate, then what happens to the garden done? So we're really looking for the things that contribute to the viability of your garden over time. So about our application. Some of you may be familiar with the application. Some of you may have already gotten in and taken a look at it. It is available in PDF form on our website and has been. Now that the window is open as of today, you can get in the system and take a look. It is long, but it is intentional. It is not just a grant application. So the grant application really was created to serve as a resource for those who are implementing garden programs. If you look closely at all of the questions and you start to see some of the things that are asked, it does cover all of the components of a successful garden project, everything from, like we mentioned, integration into the community, sustainability over time, other sources of funding, your goals. The application really can help you create a plan, especially if you're starting a new garden. But even if you're looking to grow or maintain your garden, it can help you think through, some of the other components that maybe you haven't thought about up until that point, and potentially get funding for your garden as well.
Let's talk about the appropriate use of the funds. So the funds can be used to start a brand new garden or help support an already existing garden. I did see a question in the Q&A about starting a brand new garden at a new school. Yes, that is an appropriate use of the funds and you are eligible to apply. And it can support any type of garden. So what we mean by this is either raised beds or hydroponics. It doesn't matter what your garden looks like as long as you're growing food and you're growing food with kids. And the funds can be used for scholarship or fees to attend a training as long as it doesn't exceed 30% or $900. Funds cannot be used for real estate, travel funds, or field trips. This grant is meant to be flexible to support whatever needs your edible education needs. And if we can go to the next slide to talk about the grant requirements. So you need to start spending the funds within a year of receiving them, but there is no deadline by which you need to have spent all of the funds. We're not going to ask for pictures of the receipts, but we do ask that you keep them on hand just in case we have any questions about how the funds were utilized. You will also need to complete a progress report about a year after just to give us an update about how your garden is doing. Here you can also detail any changes that you made from your original grant application, including any changes to the ways you use the funds. Next, we'll talk about eligibility. So for this school grant webinar, I'm going to talk specifically about schools. Nonprofits are also eligible to apply, but for schools, any school that serves grades K through 12. So this does exclude pre-kindergarten. If you're a school that has pre-kindergarten and other grades, then you are eligible to apply. But if you're solely a pre-kindergarten school, you're not eligible. The school itself has to be a public school or a nonprofit private school, a tribally controlled school, or a Bureau of Indian Education. Gardens must be on the school ground itself. If your garden is located at a separate area or organization, that entity has to be the applying entity. The garden can be within a 5-minute walk of the school garden of the school. We just want the garden to be deep in school culture, and we find that it needs to be on school grounds in order to do that. And of course, you have to grow food like carrots, vegetables, and whatnot. Next, we're going to talk about eligibility to reapply. So we are accepting applications from previous recipients of the garden grant. A few years ago, we only for a one-time grant, and that's changed. But you cannot have received a garden grant within the last year. So if you are a 2022 garden grant recipient, you are not eligible to reapply this garden grant cycle. If you're a past recipient, you must have also completed your progress report. So if you have not done so and you're trying to apply, complete the progress report, and then you can open a garden grant. Also, you can only receive a total of 2 garden grants. So if you received your initial garden grant and then reapplied and also received the renewal, you can't receive a 3rd grant.
All right, thank you, Vanessa. So I want to take a minute. I'm seeing some really great questions come through the Q&A that I did not specify, and I would love to specify now before we get any further. When I say we accept garden grants from all types of gardens, all shapes and sizes, that does include indoor growing and things like that. So hydroponics, aquaponics, all of that, so long as you're growing food, that those are absolutely eligible and great things to submit as your plan. So moving on to fiscal sponsor. This might also answer some of the questions I'm coming through that have to do with some of the community relationships you all might have. In the application, you have the opportunity, if needed, to apply with a fiscal sponsor. So we see a fiscal sponsor as being an entity that will receive and be responsible for the grant funds if awarded on behalf of the applying entity. So this is not required by us or by our application or the grant program. It's totally up to you all. If you have a model where you need a fiscal sponsor, a great example for you school applicants is going to be if you have to have grant funding come through the district could serve as your fiscal sponsor. That's just one example of where a fiscal sponsor might be relevant. Keep in mind that the fiscal sponsor entity, if not like your school district or something, if it's a community partner you're working with, it must be a nonprofit. We are only able to issue funds to schools, the types of schools that Vanessa previously mentioned, but also when it comes to those non-school entities, they have to be that 501c3. So if you're trying to apply with a fiscal sponsor that is an entity separate from your school, ensuring that they're nonprofit, they'll also serve as your grantee. They'll receive the check on your behalf and they will be responsible. They assume fiscal responsibility essentially. And we'll show you kind of what this looks like in the application as we go. So some of the other requirements of the application are that you get a letter of support and submit that with your application from your leadership or your administration at your school. So in most cases, this is going to be your principal on letterhead, and there's no template. There's nothing specific that needs to be in the letter beyond them expressing that they know about, that they are an advocate for, and that they support the growth of the garden program at your school. A community partner is also another requirement. Community partner is any relationship or partnership that you may have with an external entity in your community. So, you know, a few examples might be a school that's partnering with another local nonprofit. Perhaps they're your community partner, or a master gardener association or club that's local to you, perhaps a library. It could be a for-profit business as well. Suppose you have a really strong relationship with a hardware store or a gardening store, or you know, a Whole Foods market even in your area. Those could all serve as community partners. And then photos or a garden plan. So I'll give you guys some examples. We'll show you about the photos here in a couple of slides. Again, the letter of support, that we don't have a template, so it's up to you guys. It's on your letterhead. It's the principal's response, or you know, however they want to express that they know about and are supportive of applying for the grant and for supporting the garden program. The reason for this, as I kind of shared earlier, is that we know these gardens that have administrative buy-in are more successful and sustainable over time. So that's why we ask for this letter. Some more specifics about community partners. So to reiterate, it can be nonprofit, it can be for-profit, must be external to the applying school. So One exception, something that would not qualify as a community partner, would be if your PTA or your PTO is highly involved in your garden program or with your school. We do not consider that to be an external entity. So that wouldn't be a good choice for your community partner, but any other relationship that you might have with an organization in your community should be just fine, right? Their support can come to you in a variety of ways. It can be donations, it can be monetary support, it can be gardening advice or consultation, it can be volunteer support. So there's no one right answer, no one size fits all. We've seen all kinds of different scenarios. So if you have any uncertainty, you can absolutely reach out to us and let us know. This is a requirement of the grant, and it is in the grant application, which we're going to show you. And it might be possible to submit your application without it, but keep in mind that not having a community partner listed in your application will impact how the application is scored and reviewed. So for photos, the third requirement I mentioned, the reason we ask for photos is because it helps our reviewers envision the garden plan. So we have a team of qualified grant reviewers external to our Whole Kids team that have experience working in school gardens and gardening education and gardening with youth, and being able to see a visual of what you all have planned or have already done and plan to grow is super helpful. If you are applying to build a new garden, you may not have a photo of your garden space already, right? So including a garden layout or a diagram, it doesn't have to be fancy. You can draw it with a pen and paper to just show us what you have in mind, and then perhaps a photo of the space where your garden might live. And I'm going to show you some examples of those. We ask that you don't submit more than 3 photos. You can submit up to 3 photos, 5 megabytes or smaller, in any of the following formats: PNG, JPEG, GIF. If you submit more than 3 photos, we will only look at the first 3 photos. So if you want to share more, just make sure that your best ones are the first 3 ones so that the reviewers see them. And then they don't need to include students or youth. The photos don't need to have them. Make sure, if you are, for those of you who maybe already have a garden program, you have a really great photo you want to share, there's kids in the photo, make sure you're only sharing photos for children for whom you have a photo release. I'm sure you are aware, you know that. So here are some photo examples, right? So this is maybe an example from an applicant who was getting ready to build a garden. They didn't have a garden program yet. And so they just sent us a photo of the space where their garden beds were going to go. Similarly, on the right-hand side, same, wanting us to see where they plan to build their garden. And then for the diagram or the layout, they run the gamut, right? So nothing fancy. It doesn't have to be computer generated. It can be like you see on the left here with pen and paper, just giving us a sense of, the school is to the north of where the garden will be, and then the sidewalk, and here's parking, and this is where we're going to put the different components of our garden. So do what makes sense for you all. It's really just to give the reviewer an idea of what you have in mind. So we are going to get back to some logistics, reminders on the timeline. Vanessa will share.
So the application deadline is March 1st. So you guys have a month to complete the application. The review period for us, once the application closes, is March through June. We'll begin our selection process in June and August, and we'll notify all applicants regardless of the decision August 1st. So whether that means you were awarded or you were placed on hold. And then we'll send out a grant agreement at the end of August, which needs to be signed in order for us to send you your grant award, which you'll receive at the end of September. I do want to emphasize that this month can go by quite quickly, and we encourage you to start as early as possible because we want to be able to answer your questions timely, and it can get pretty busy towards the end of the cycle. So if you're placed on hold, we encourage you to reapply the next year. So if you were placed on hold last year, you might have gotten an email yesterday encouraging you to reapply. We just received so many qualified applicants that it's impossible for us to fund all of them, but we encourage you to reapply. You can't use the same application, but you can use some of the same information, but we do encourage you to include any updates to the plan or the school or the budget. Now I'll talk about some of the resources. So online on our website, we have a copy of the application, which we encourage you to download and potentially answer offline so that when you're ready, you can just copy paste your answers into the application online, just in case the grant system isn't working for you quite right. So you have all of your answers saved separately. We also have our frequently asked questions. We have some grant writing tips that are really helpful, that it's not going to include what to write, but more so how to communicate your information. And this was done in partnership with Food Corps. Then we also have a garden curriculum that's appropriate for K through 5th grade, and it was in partnership with American Heart Association that we developed it. It's online and it's free to download. We also have our school garden resource center that includes links to other websites, perhaps other grants or curriculums. We also have some success stories that are just really fun to read and can be a source of inspiration for maybe where you want to see your garden go. And then we also have a kids club that includes lots of activities, garden and nutrition related, and you can search through the topic. And this is all online on our website. I do want to give a special shout out to our Garden to Cafeteria program. Like we talked about earlier, our mission is to encourage nutrition changes in children, and a way to take this from the garden is to take it to the cafeteria. So we have this available on our website. It's the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit about how to safely serve garden produce in the cafeteria.
Great, thank you so much, Vanessa. So we're going to get started and dive into some of the more technical aspects of applying for our grant, show you guys around the system if you're not already familiar. It might provide a little bit more context and info too about some of the things we've already talked about, and then we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for Q&A, because I find it can be super helpful and I'm seeing a lot of really great questions come through. So to get started, all applications must be submitted online through our grant portal. So while we do have a copy of the application available on the website, and we would encourage you to use that PDF as like a prep tool to maybe work offline, all your final applications must be submitted through this portal. So you can take a screenshot of this. You can, find it on our website is probably the easiest way. If you go to our garden grant page on the Whole Kids website, there will be an apply now button and it'll route you here. So the system is called Smart Simple. We're going to walk you through right now what that's going to look like. So once you go to Smart Simple via our website or otherwise, this is what you're going to arrive at. This is the login page. If you're a returning applicant, maybe you've submitted an application in the past and either received a grant or been placed on hold, you're going to be a returning applicant. You will have a login already, so you won't need to go through the process of registering. If you have your password, great. If you don't have your password or you don't remember, you can utilize the forgot password function to reset that. And if all else fails, if you have any issues with that, you can absolutely reach out to us. We're happy to support. And then if you're a new applicant, new to Whole Kids Foundation Garden Grant, you will have to go through a process of registering your organization, your school or organization in the system. So you'll do that with that green button underneath the login. I'm wondering if I can annotate here. Let's see if I can get you guys a pointer. Is this working, Vanessa? Can you see where I'm indicating?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So this will be super helpful as we go through. So the first step of registering will be that you guys have to complete a profile questionnaire. And this is just letting us know what type of entity you are. So for most of you on this webinar, assuming you are all supporting gardens that live at schools, and I've seen a lot of questions come through. We're going to clarify that in a little while, but let's just assume, right? This garden lives at a school. You'll choose whether you're in the US or Canada. You're a US school for this instance, US school. Canada will have, it'll say school, and then public or private. So that tells us what type of entity you are. And based on how you answer, you'll be routed to the next page where it's going to support you, link you to either the NCES database or the CRA database if you're a school in Canada. So we'll start with the NCES database. So some of you may be familiar with this. It's National Center for Education Statistics, I believe, and The reason we're linked here is because we need your NCES number in order to verify that you are a public school within part of the public school system. Private schools, I will get there in just a minute. The NCES database button here is how you're going to do that. You may know your NCES number already. That's fantastic. Then you can probably just type it right in. If you've done this search process offline, say you may have obtained the information, you can just manually type it all in. It'll ask for the NCES number and some basic info about your school. Otherwise, you can use the search function in the database. Private schools, you will go through a similar process, but as a private school, you're going to also need your EIN. Your EIN is going to be how we verify that you're a nonprofit private school. If there are any religiously affiliated schools listening, you may end up needing the EIN of, say, the larger umbrella organization that you're part of. So when you go to do your search for your NCES number, we recommend always being creative in your search, liberal with your search terms. I'm going to use my example I use every year of this school, Zilker Elementary. So this is what the thing is going to look like, right? It's going to give you all of these fields. What you should not do is try to enter in all of these fields and find your school. Because if you don't type them in exactly the way the system has them typed in, it's going to tell you that there's no result. So a better method would be to take 1 or 2 words out of your school name, use it in the name box and search that way. So I use the example of Zilker Elementary. It's a unique word. It's more than likely that they're going to be able to return a search result on the word Zilker alone. But if you are with a school that has a more common name or words in the name that are, more commonly used, I'll say like Jefferson Elementary, there could be 5 Jefferson Elementaries in the same city. You might opt to type in Jefferson and then perhaps your city or your state, or you could just do Jefferson and it'll give you a lot of Jefferson results. And then you can choose based on the address, which is the correct one. So once you've found the correct school, you've gotten your search term result, you're going to click it and it's going to auto-populate most of the location data for you. This is going to be the same for Canadian schools and private schools. It will auto-populate if you choose to use the database integrations, but the purpose of the database is to provide you an ability to find your numbers, NCES, EIN, or CRA. You'll notice here, not every field is filled out. So make sure that when you're doing it, you're verifying, right? You've selected your result, but you can see in this example, the state field wasn't populated. And so you'll have to choose the state field and the county field as well before being able to fully submit. So for Canadian schools, the process is going to be the same. You're going to utilize this CRA database button function to look for your CRA number or the CRA number of your district or school board that you're a part of. Once you find it, it will auto-populate the information for you. And I would suggest same tips and tricks, right? Like try not to type in, a full phrase or name of your Board of Education or your school district, maybe unique words, 1 or 2 words, and perhaps a location piece to ensure you get the results you need. So when you've done all of this, if you've done it to completion and it's been accepted, like none of the fields were blank or anything, you will get this registration complete screen. So if you don't see this confirmation page, that means that perhaps some of the fields were blank or it didn't take, but this will be how you know. Once you've seen this, you can expect to receive an email from the system providing you with your login and password. You will have also given your name and your email address. So that's how they'll choose your username for you and they'll generate a temporary password. So this email should come to you. Do give it a little bit of time, especially towards the end of the window. If the system is being heavily utilized by applicants, it may take a little bit longer. And if you don't see it, check your junk and spam folders. And if you still don't see it there, email us at grants@wholekidsfoundation.org and we can get you set up. So throughout all of that process, if anyone has any issues, there are always questions, there are always uncertainties. That's fantastic. Please email us, myself and Vanessa, and we have 2 fantastic interns who will be manning the Grants at Whole Kids Foundation inbox and ready to support you with all of your grant applications and Smart Simple questions. So some basic registration tips that I always like to share. Again, being liberal in your search terms, right? Using just 1 or 2 keywords, ensuring that all of the fields are selected or auto-populated. Usually that means you're going to have to select the state and the county fields and doing the state before the county. It's a funny thing in the system. If you don't pick the state, the county, they don't know what counties, right? So always look for those state and county drop downs, fill those out before making sure that you're ready to submit. Using Chrome as your browser if possible. It will work with other browsers. We just have found that Chrome gives the least amount of trouble. So if you have the ability to use Chrome, we would recommend it. Please read the directions on each page carefully. They may be a little bit different, or they may reiterate some of what we've shared today that could be helpful for you in the moment when you get ready to register and apply. And then if all else fails, please contact us, grants@wholekidsfoundation.org. So once you get into the system, this is what your portal is going to look like. It's pretty straightforward. This is your homepage. You're going to have a few key things here. This will tell you how you are logged in, right? So if you are an applicant only affiliated with or applying on behalf of one school, this is the only one, right? But if you're one of those individuals out there who supports many schools, you might have multiple organizations affiliated with your name. And so you would be able to toggle between them using this little building icon up here in the top right-hand corner. So some other key things, your organization profile right here is going to be where all the details about your school live. Should you need to update or edit them, you can do that here. Your personal profile will be your individual details, your name, your title, your email address, and changing your password should you want to do that once you get into the system for any reason. If you need to, turn it over, you're sharing the work of applying with somebody, that could be relevant. About Whole Kids Foundation, we'll just take you to our website. And then, down here on the left-hand side is our funding opportunities panel. This is where you're going to find the Garden Grant application button. You will just click on that apply now button, and that should open up the, that should open up the application for you. There are a handful of what we call validation checks on the system. And if you get a pop-up message that you're not expecting to see, please just email us. Once you open up your application and you save, you will find those applications here in the My Application section. So I'm going to pass it off to Vanessa to share a little bit more about Fiscal Sponsor, the way you'll see it in the system.
So Stephanie talked earlier about when it's appropriate to have a fiscal sponsor. So once you open your application, the first tab is going to ask you if you want to register one. And if you do, and it's appropriate, you're going to go ahead and say yes. And then you're going to have to find them in the system. And if they don't already exist in the system, you're going to want to register them, and you'll be able to do that in the application. And you're going to need their EIN number. So when you start this process, make sure you already have that available, so there are no pauses to your application. And then you're also going to need a primary contact for that fiscal sponsor. So their name, title, email, and phone number. Next, we'll talk about the grantee information. So the grantee information is who is going to sign the grant agreement and receive the grant check. So whoever you list needs to be an appropriate person to sign formal documents. Oftentimes at schools, this is the principal. So if you are not going to list the principal and you would like to list yourself, just make sure that you have the authority to sign formal documents. And then they're also going to ask you for the address here, and that's where the shipment of the grant award will go. I know some people might be a little bit confused about who to include in the grantee. So if you have a fiscal sponsor, you're going to use the fiscal sponsor as the information for the grantee section. So your fiscal sponsor and grantee should always match. And then if you don't have a fiscal sponsor, then the applying entity will match the grantee section. So if you get to the end and you realize the check needs to be awarded not to your school, but to another entity, that's a good note to realize you have to register a fiscal sponsor. So if the check needs to be written to any other entity other than the applying one, that's when you need a fiscal sponsor. Let's go to the next slide to talk about extended community support. So we want to know who supports you, and we would love to know everyone you work with. We've talked a lot about sustainability today and how it is important for a garden to have support. So we want to know how many partners you have. And then we want to see what that relationship looks like. So what type of contribution do they make? Is it monetary? Is it volunteer? It can be different for every single person or partner that you work with. Now we'll go and talk about the budgets. The budget section is separated into 3 separate parts, and the first one is the annual garden expenses. So we want a whole picture of what your garden program costs every year. If you don't have a garden yet, it's okay to predict what you think those fees will be. So we just want a good general idea of your expenses for the year. And the second part of the garden budget is the grant funding allocation. So we want to know how you're going to spend the $3,000. And we want you to be more specific than just including $3,000 and the description being garden supplies. So we want to know what the funds are going to support. So you could say seeds and then put $500, but we don't need to know like 4 packets of tomatoes, 4 packets of cucumbers, 4 packets of whatever not. So we just want a good general idea of how you're spending the funds so we can get a good picture of what you're going to do with the grant. The next section of the budget is the projected garden revenue. And here you're going to tell us about how do you find income for your garden. We know $3,000 is a good size grant, but it's not intended to be the only source of income to keep your garden going. So we want to know, are you potentially applying to other grants? And if you do apply to other grants, feel free to let us know if it's pending or confirmed that you have the grant. Or are people donating? Do you have PTO support and that kind of thing?
Right. So some final tips and tricks, reminders, things we may have already said, but that I find to be super important. And then we're going to dive into your questions. There are so many good ones that I'm excited to answer. Vanessa mentioned that the month can go by really quickly, and indeed it does. So get started as early as you can. I would again recommend, emphasize that you all at least take a look at the PDF version of the application that we have on the website and use it as a preparation tool. Working offline outside of the system to prepare your questions, the answers to the questions can be super helpful as you're working through the next few weeks, and to avoid any like technical issues. The system bumps you out or something. In the spirit of working with technology, always save draft. If you're working in the system and you're putting those answers into the application in Smart Simple, just hit save draft regularly. That'll be sure to save. You don't have to complete the application in one sitting. You can come back to it and work on it over time, but just wanting to make sure you don't lose any content that you had spent time on. So the second bullet, it says, where does or will this garden live? And we haven't spoken specifically to this too much yet, but it's a great question to ask yourself if you are working out or trying to figure out how you should apply. Are you a nonprofit? You work with multiple schools. The garden lives at a community partner nonprofit where your students go to, this kind of thing. So the model by which you implement your programming may create confusion, right? But ultimately it comes down to where is the garden going to live? So if the garden lives on the grounds of a nonprofit organization, say it's a community garden space and your students go into that space, that application should be in the name of the community garden, assuming it's eligible, right? 501c3 nonprofit. If your garden is on the grounds of the school, which is what we ask for your school applications, then you're going to apply in the name of the school. And who is doing the work of submitting the application is up to you all, and who supports your garden and how you implement your programming. You can be working on behalf of a nonprofit, but supporting many schools with many gardens. And you can write that application for a garden at one of those schools, but the application will be in the school's name. So it all comes back to where does or will the garden live, and that's how the application should be set up. That being said, if you are somebody who supports multiple schools, that means you can apply for multiple grants, because you will be applying on behalf of each individual school if each individual school has a garden. So there's some great, really specific questions that I think will speak to this a little bit better and maybe give some more examples, but don't forget this question, right? If you have questions about it, where is your garden going to live? So completing all parts of the application to the best of your ability. Most of the fields in the application are mandatory, right? So it's not going to let you submit with an empty application, but there are some parts that you may be able to get by without a response, or if you're getting any sort of support on our end with submission, then there may be an ability for the fields to be blank. But I would highly recommend you do a thorough once over when you're ready to submit, making sure all parts of your budget are completed, all parts of the community partner section are complete. We'll still take the applications, we'll review them as normal if some things are missing, but it will impact the way in which it's reviewed. And then again, check your junk folders. If you're getting support from us, or trying to get support from us, but you're not getting responses, always check those junk and spam folders. And then similarly with the forget password function of the website. So let's dive into some questions. I know Vanessa's had a few minutes here to take a peek at what is coming through. So I'm going to give her an opportunity to surface some of those, and she and I can share in responding. And then I too have a couple that we'll get to as well.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about schools that might partner with nonprofits, how they should go about applying. What if that partner nonprofit works with multiple schools, what that application should look like.
Okay, so I too have this written down. So in the case of what we call an SGSO, a school garden support organization, that's a nonprofit organization that supports many schools. And again, it's that question of where does the garden live, right? So if we're talking about one specific school or location and they've got a garden that you want to apply on behalf of, or you want to build a garden there, that is one application for that school specifically, and you have the ability to apply in the same cycle for other schools and their gardens, so long as the locations are distinct. When it comes to a nonprofit, if you're with a nonprofit organization, a youth programming nonprofit, not a nonprofit private school, we'll go back there, but like a youth programming nonprofit, say a Boys and Girls Club, or some sort of summer camp, or any other type of nonprofit, you would be considered a nonprofit organization application. So wherever that garden's going to live, that garden lives on the location of this said Boys and Girls Club, then and you will apply as that Boys and Girls Club chapter, similarly with like YMCAs or the summer camps. Private schools, assuming they have traditional programming like school, or they, you know, that model, you know, you're a school, but you're not part of the public school system. We need your EIN because that's how we'll verify that you're a nonprofit, but you should also still apply as the school. If your garden's going to live at your school, whether you're a religiously affiliated, faith-based, Montessori school, that kind of thing, all these school things still apply to you. We just need that additional layer of the EIN to verify nonprofit status. Yeah, Vanessa, does that get at some of what you're seeing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can move on to a different type of question if you're ready.
Yeah, that's great.
So we are getting some questions about if the funds can be used to pay for personnel to help support the garden or support garden curriculum development and that kind of area.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the short answer is yes. We do allow for the grant funds to be used to support personnel that support the garden. Obviously, $3,000 is not going to pay, right, the full salary of, say, your garden coordinator, but it can absolutely go towards stipends for people that are supporting your garden, or a part of, how you support those who are taking care of your garden. Curriculum development. That's a great question. Yes, yeah, it can, so long as it's part of so long as it's part of a garden program that's already meeting some of these eligibility requirements, right? So if you already have a developed garden that's growing edible items and engaging kids in that nutrition and education component and gardening education, and you're looking to develop some curriculum that is a fit. If it were a new garden and you wanted to start with curriculum development, we may view that a little bit differently.
Thank you, Stephanie. There are some questions about the timing of using the funds. For example, we have an applicant who says Alaska has a really harsh winter, so they wouldn't be able to use the funds until the spring. Can you speak a little bit about how long people have to use the funds?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we absolutely recognize that growing seasons are different. So you would get the funds most likely in September, and our only requirement is that you start using the funds within 1 year of receiving them. You do not have to spend all $3,000 within that 1 year. So, if you get those funds in September, you have until the following September to start spending. Just keep in mind that we do ask for a progress report as well, and so at around the same time, at around that 1 year mark, you are going to be asked for a report to give us an update on the plan. So but we also absolutely recognize that things changed, right, throughout the course of the year. And so to submit a progress report where things have changed or where your plan has been delayed or something like that is absolutely okay too. So the bottom line here is you have 1 year to start spending the funding. You do not have to spend it all. So if that means you're waiting quite a while after September to start, you do have some flexibility there.
I see quite a few questions about community partners and how many people should have. Is it okay if they're faith-based? And how that either hurts or doesn't hurt their application.
Great. Yeah. Yes, it's absolutely okay if they're faith-based organizations. Absolutely fine. How many do you have to have? There's no one size fits all. There's no one right answer, right? We might view an organization or an applicant that has 5 relationships in their community as potentially being more sustainable over time than one that has no relationships with their community. But we don't look at this component of the application in isolation, right? So it's important to us, and we do see the extent to which you've built relationships in your community as an important part, but we're also looking at so many other things in your application. So I wouldn't even go so far as to say that if you only have one, that it's going to impact your application that significantly.
I also want to encourage you guys to upvote any questions that you see that you also are asking so that we can see them at the top of the Q&A function.
Yeah. Vanessa, I saw two that I would want to make sure that I can address if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. I saw somebody ask a question specific to being affiliated with Whole Foods Market or Amazon. And I just want to call out and say there's absolutely no conflict of interest there, right? We love when Whole Foods Market employees, and now as time goes on, right, Amazon employees that learn about our grant program and are connected to schools and organizations doing this work in their community that encourage those organizations to apply. So please do, if you know, are work with or connected to schools in your area, but may work for Amazon or Whole Foods Market, let us know that information too. We love hearing that as well. So no concern on conflict of interest there. And then something else I saw, I just wanted to put out there. It seems like we've got some returning Whole Kids grant applicants to us, because a lot of you have asked about whether or not we recently placed a limit on how many grants you could get. And the answer is yes, we did recently decide that at this point in time, with the high number of applications that we receive, we are limiting to 2 garden grants. Vanessa mentioned earlier, we get over 1,000 applications every year, and we just can't possibly fund all of the qualified programs. We wish we could. And so we just want to make sure that we're able to reach as many schools as possible. So we do ask that you wait 1 year in between your initial grant application and your other grant application. So over the course of that time, it's about 3 years at minimum, right, that you have the opportunity to potentially get $6,000 in garden grant funds. So I apologize if anyone was coming back. They've already received 2 garden grants from us. Feel free to email if you have any more questions, but I did want to share clarity around that as well for those of you who are already familiar with our program. Okay, I have a couple more. Vanessa, you okay if I just hit them real fast?
Absolutely.
Okay, so somebody made a comment about you've used the Smart Simple system in the past and you're wondering if you can create a new account because you don't know your password. The system will limit you. It will block you if you try to create another account for yourself or for your school or organization. So it knows if you go and try to re-register your same school, you'll have trouble. So please reach out to us if you're having any issues. We're happy to get in there, figure out, if the school already has an account, who may be linked to that. We see that a lot, right? Somebody was affiliated with the school and now there's a new person at the school and they want access. So email us. We're all hands on deck, ready to support you guys through your grant application. So send us notes about that. I did see somebody had a question about timing as well, but more related to, not related to like growing season, but related to having a new school that won't open until the summer and their ability to get started. And so I just want to reiterate, I don't know the ins and outs of your situation, but you guys are not going to, the funds awarded won't be received until September. So keep in mind that none of these funds are going to be received by you all, by the recipients until September of 2023. And then again, to our sharing about the timeline, you have an entire year to start funding or to start spending those funds. So knowing those 2 things, that may help guide your decision. So we only have a couple of minutes. I'm good to answer a few more questions. Anyone who wants to hang out for a few more questions, we'll keep going with a few more for a few more minutes. Otherwise, we will have the recording, right? So you can always tune in to see what else was covered. And at the very least, you can email us. So in the last little bit of time, Vanessa, any really pressing ones you want to make sure that we share out with the whole group?
Yeah, I do think this question will be helpful for all applicants. Someone asked like what you consider the more important criteria in the application.
Yeah, great question. So we definitely look for those things that we consider to be required, right? So the community partner, the support from your principal, we do look at need as a factor, right? So and it's important to us. So the way that looks based on the type of applicant you are may be different, but the bottom line is if if you have a need in your community, just making sure that you share that as part of your application. Being able to communicate to us specifically, what's going on with your students or with your community is super helpful for us when we look at that kind of thing, so that we have the ability to look outside of, say, FRPL %, which we do also look at. So need, community partner, what was the other thing? Letter of support. That you have a well thought out plan, that you've given thought to your goals, that they're attainable, that you've considered additional sources of funding is also another big one. You don't have to have them all confirmed, but we do like to know that you guys are thinking about these things, right? Because this $3,000 won't last forever. And so knowing that thought has been given to the additional sources of funding is also important. And I will share that we do also look at other things such as geographic distribution. So there are a lot of factors that go into the way in which we end up with our 500 to 600 recipient pool, some of which are from your application and some of which are just the way it is with, something like geographic distribution. Okay, so it's 3:01 and I'm hoping we got a lot of your questions answered. Keep in mind, there is a Q&A specific webinar on February 15th. Please join us if you want to hear more questions answered, or if you have questions. Otherwise, you can reach out to us. You can check out our website. You can check out this webinar, share the webinar recording as well for anyone that may have wanted to join. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your afternoon to join us. We look forward to receiving and reviewing all of your applications.